On paper, Marriagetoxin looks like it should be a fairly standard harem setup. An awkward man is forced to find a marriage partner, there's multiple potential love interests, and romantic scenarios unfold across different arcs. Now, I'm not particularly a harem fan, even Yuri harem isn't for me. I've just never been able to get into them. So how on God's green earth did a Shonen Jump Plus harem of all things genuinely grab my attention? Well, in the first chapter alone, 2 narrative setups took me by surprise and intrigued me. The first setup is tied directly to the story's central conflict. Gero, the series' main protagonist, and his sister Akari are pressured into a forced marriage to produce an heir and continue the Poison Master clan, who are top-class assassins. It's a familiar setup in stories built around tradition and bloodlines, except the story immediately undercuts that expectation because Gero's sister is a lesbian. She already has a loving girlfriend, and rather than treating that as a joke or a temporary complication, the manga treats it as something real and worth protecting. So Gero makes the decision that completely recontextualizes him as a protagonist. He chooses to shoulder the burden himself. He's willing to sacrifice his own happiness and future because he refuses to let his sister be forced into a marriage she doesn't want. That alone shattered my expectations because it frames queerness not as shock value, but structurally important to the narrative and as something that sits at the heart of the story. The second narrative decision that made me raise my eyebrow is that the first person Gero is visibly enamoured by is Mayor Kinosaki. The attraction is instant and physical enough that Gero literally faceplants into a vending machine like a loser because he's so distracted by her beautiful aura. And if you've read even a handful of harem manga, or honestly rom-coms in general, you'll recognise the setup immediately. The first girl wins trope. Love Hina and the pet girl of Sakura-so are prime examples where, if the title didn't give it away, the first girl the protagonist meets usually ends up being the one he dates or marries by the end. So Marriagetoxin nudges you towards expecting a fairly standard straight romantic plot. Only thing is though, Kinosaki is a guy, not a girl. He's just femme-presenting and openly gender non-conforming in how he presents. And that twist only deepens when Gero asks Kinosaki for help finding a marriage partner, because it's revealed that Kinosaki is a marriage swindler, a professional con artist who understands relationships with women and men far better than Gero does. In return, Gero agrees to protect Kinosaki and his injured brother who's in hospital. Those 2 narrative choices made it immediately clear that Marriagetoxin wasn't going to follow the genre rules it pretended to set up. The story is all about framing romance as a matter of choice rather than obligation. It's almost like the movie Hitch with Will Smith, but animanga with a potential gay ending instead, so of course it was going to grab my attention. That being said, Marriagetoxin is still very much a shonen series. The action, pacing and paneling rhythms sit comfortably alongside mainstream Jump titles, which makes sense given the artist of the series, Mizuki Yoda, was an assistant for both Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen. Also, queer characters in harem or reverse harem stories aren't new. I'm not trying to make it seem like Marriagetoxin is the first of its kind. Titles like Kiss Him Not Me, or In High School Host Club, or My Next Life as a Villainess have been playing with those queer dynamics for years. What's different is where Marriagetoxin is published. Jump and Jump Plus harem titles like To Love Ru, Yuna and the Haunted Hot Springs, or World's End Harem tend to assume straight romance as the default. Queer characters, if they exist at all, are rarely positioned as emotionally important to the story. Whilst Marriagetoxin takes a different approach entirely. I mean, it genuinely wouldn't be the story it is without lesbians.
Let's go, lesbians! Oh my god, lesbians!
And that same willingness to push against expectations extends to Gero, who ends up being one of the most interesting harem male leads I've read. Which, granted the bar wasn't high, but still. In the early chapters, Gero sounds like your typical harem protagonist, terrible with women and romantically inexperienced. But he feels different because he isn't written as a bland audience insert. He isn't a blank slate for projection, nor a passive object for multiple women to chase. Gero has a strong, distinct personality shaped by a strict upbringing and genuine emotional sincerity. His romantic ineptitude is more plot-driven than a reason for comedic gags. Gero actively seeks help, appreciates it, and slowly improves over time. And while each arc often focuses on a different woman, It never feels like Gero's character development is sacrificed for the waifu rotation. The women aren't caricatures. I mean, they do all somewhat compete for Gero's affection and time, but they're individuals with different values and agency. They even save Gero and Kinasaki a fair few times. So right from the outset, Marriagetoxin shows that it isn't interested in being a traditional harem. You get your typical battle shonen action, the romance is messy but human with splashes of queerness, and the genre expectations are reversed almost immediately. And that's before I start digging into why it works as well as it does, which I'm going to divide into separate chapters. Very quickly before I start the next topic, if this video's got you interested in Marriagetoxin and you're wondering where to buy the manga, I want to point you towards Walt's Comic Shop. If you're someone who collects US comics, omnibuses, manga, deluxe hardcovers or graphic novels, Walt's Comic Shop is well worth knowing about. They're based in Europe, but they carry one of the largest stocks of comics and manga on the continent. One of their biggest draws for me, and something I really want to highlight, is their packaging, because it's genuinely some of the best I've seen. Walt's Comic Shop was super kind and sent me Marriagetoxin volumes 1 to 9 for free, and everything I received arrived in pristine condition. The volumes were tightly wrapped in bubble wrap, cushioned with biodegradable packing peanuts and cardboard, and sealed inside a strong outer carton. It's been snowing where I live, so there's always a concern about moisture or damp affecting paper stock, but they put a lot of effort into making sure everything is properly protected. Also, there were no creased corners or scuffs, none of that minor damage that's unfortunately become pretty normal with book deliveries. On top of that, all shipments are fully insured and trackable, which is a big plus when you're ordering pricier products. And if anything does go wrong, their customer service is so responsive to questions or concerns, with actual humans talking to you, not an AI bot chat. They also run newsletters where you can keep up with new releases, which is genuinely useful if you're trying to stay on top of upcoming series or get discounted pre-orders. If you're someone who buys manga and or Western comics, I couldn't recommend this store enough. Check out the link in the description to see their full selection of products, which includes a Marriagetoxin bundle, which will save you some money compared to buying the volumes individually. And for those in the UK or EU, you can use my code LINESINMOTION to get free shipping on your first order over £40 or €40. A big thank you to Walt's Comic Shop for sponsoring this video and sending across all the Marriagetoxin volumes. It is much appreciated. One of the things I like about Marriagetoxin is how it handles masculinity in a genre and demographic that frequently equates male value with power. For example, on the very first page, in fact the very first panel of the story, poison is explicitly described as a cowardly method of assassination. And that wording matters. Historically, poison has been framed as the archetypal woman's weapon, not because it's weak, but because it doesn't rely on physical strength and is often dismissed as a lesser form of power. What's interesting is that Marriagetoxin doesn't dispute that framing so much as it ignores the judgment entirely. Gero's power is built on poison anyway, not as a last resort or as something to be ashamed of, but as a skill. And while Gero absolutely does get into brutal, explosive fights, often hand to hand, those moments are still underpinned by preparation and calculation. His strength isn't innate, he's literally injecting himself with toxins every chapter, something he was forced to adapt to under a brutally strict family upbringing. The story never treats that as cowardice or a shame upon his masculinity. In fact, people fear his appearance due to his deadly but somewhat artful reputation, showing how competent he really is, even if other men consider it cowardly. That framing bleeds directly into how Gero relates to other people, especially women. When women are presented as rewards, perks or services, he's visibly uncomfortable. And while that should be bare minimum, the series makes a point of showing how he's laughed at and mocked by other men for treating women with basic respect. Those specific reactions by men are telling because it mirrors how toxic masculinity functions socially. Unfortunately for some, respect for women is framed as emasculating, consent is treated as optional, entitlement is treated as normal, and care is framed as weakness, often reinforced by other men. Gero doesn't fit that mould. I mean, he's seeking romance and marriage, but mostly for his lesbian sister's sake. And even then, what Gero does want from a partner isn't status or children or a continuation of the family line. It's more intimate than that. He wants small talk, mutual concern, someone who notices when the other is sick. His idea of romance is rooted in care and emotional intimacy, not patriarchal expectation. He even worries that saving women during missions might create an uneven power dynamic if he were to romantically pursue them after, that it would feel like taking advantage of the situation. The idea that someone might feel entitled to affection because they help someone else clearly unsettles him, because Geralt never assumes he's owed anything, which becomes even clearer when you look at the Poison Master clan itself, and how Geralt shows discomfort in their traditions. The future of the family, its reputation, all of it, is placed above individual happiness. So Geralt's longing for domesticity makes complete sense. He's rejecting a system that treats people as tools and relationships as obligations. And that, to me, is where Marriagetoxin's version of masculinity really lands. Geralt is dangerous and principled, but a loving queer ally, if not queer himself, a subject we'll get into later, who respects women fully. One thing Marriagetoxin makes very clear early on is that it isn't interested in pretending misogyny doesn't exist in its world. The manga literally opens with a random sleazy man congratulating a newly engaged couple and immediately reducing the woman as a baby machine, with the words, "Here's to all those healthy heirs you're gonna pump out." Not even the word children. Heirs. Belongings to produce instead of, out of love. The wording is deliberately dehumanising, because it immediately echoes Geralt's life, or in particular, his sister's. Early on, Akari calls Geralt with an ultimatum. Their grandmother is serious about forcing her into marriage and producing an heir. Again, this isn't about love or choice, it's control. About trapping her future inside a role she never asked for. And this obsession with proper heirs doesn't stop there. The Poison Master clan prides itself on centuries of selective breeding, on bloodlines perfected over generations. Geralt is explicitly warned not to marry just anyone because choosing a woman deemed unfit would supposedly tarnish the clan's name. Women in this worldview aren't partners, they're vessels, objects. And that's where my guy Geralt differs. Geralt isn't written as a saint or as someone who's morally perfect, he's just decent. He treats people as he wishes to be treated, and notably, the story doesn't frame this as heroic, but as something that's just appreciated. Like, he didn't even hesitate for a second to propose to Kinosaki before a certain twist came to light, which is wildly out of character for someone as meticulous as him. Also, Kinosaki was someone Geralt was literally preparing to assassinate, but his sister's happiness was on the line, meaning his sacrifice was unquestionable to him. He proposes to Kinosaki as a solution and a way out for him, whilst having it be a solution for Akari. And, to be fair, Kinosaki immediately calls him out on that. The story doesn't romanticise desperation when it slips into entitlement, even when the intention is sympathetic. Instead, Kinosaki redirects Geralt towards something better, not marriage as a shortcut, but to help him find a partner naturally on equal footing. Misogyny isn't the point of the story, but it's baked into the kind of tropes Marriagetoxin is working with: forced marriage, bloodlines, entitlement, etc. And the series refuses to treat those concepts as harmless. As for queerness in Marriagetoxin, I've already touched upon Akari, Geralt's lesbian sister. Geralt clearly accepts her relationship and sexuality in general, as should be normal. Even the smaller moments reinforce this. Lines like "what girl would want you anyway" read at first as classic sibling teasing, or standard rom-com banter about Geralt being terminally single and hopeless. But in hindsight, well, it could be the funniest ironic foreshadowing, because as I established earlier, the very first person Geralt is shown to be attracted to isn't a girl at all. And while Marriagetoxin isn't the first Jump Plus series to feature queer characters, it's significant how comfortably this manga introduces a lesbian character early on, and builds the entire inciting conflict around protecting her happiness. But the series also doesn't stop there. Later on, we're introduced to an openly canon bi or pansexual character who expresses interest in Kinosaki even after learning he's not a woman. Doesn't even hesitate, he's just like, well, hell yeah, who cares? Gender simply isn't a deal breaker for him. No punchline or anything, just attraction. All of this matters because Marriagetoxin doesn't treat queerness as a one-off exception. I do wish we had more Akari though, especially her interacting with Kinosaki, because I think that'd make for an interesting scene, but queerness is still woven into the story's foundation, shaping motivations and relationships, and that's even before I get to the fruity relationship everyone's been waiting for. Gero and Kenosaki's relationship works because it's built on everything the story has already established, but also because, frankly, the manga does barely anything to discourage a romantic reading. Now, don't get me wrong, Gero is a bit of a dumbass. He genuinely believed Kenosaki was falling for him while literally strapped to a chair and being threatened with fatal poison. The man just had zero game and was oblivious to social cues because of the consequences of his upbringing, which is an important factor to his character and partially his relationship with Kenosaki. The manga wastes no time giving us romantic coded, you know what? Not even coded, they just are romantic moments between these two. I mean, let me just list a few scenarios. Gero carries Kenosaki bridal style. Kenosaki calls Gero dazzling whilst being cradled in his arms. They practice wedding photos together where Gero admits he struggles to smile naturally because he wants an expression worthy of you. Kenosaki pins Gero to the wall Kabadon style but with his legs instead, and these are but a mere few interactions between them. If Kenosaki were a woman, nobody would hesitate to read this as romantic tension. The creators clearly expect readers to recognise that framing, because there's no way this intimacy is unintentional. Even their smaller moments feel impactful, like Gero giving Kenosaki earrings that double as transmitters, so Gero can protect him if he's ever in danger. And when Kenosaki immediately insinuates that those are the kind of gifts that you give to a future lover, Gero gets shy, and shy is a far stretch away from dismissive. Also later, when Beppu, the bisexual king I mentioned earlier, hits on Kenosaki, he responds with, "You gotta have an annual income of so-and-so," which is a throwback to what Gero said right at the beginning of the manga. The story is very aware of its own parallels, and to drive that point even further, when Gero asks what Kenosaki thinks about Beppu, clearly meaning as a potential partner, though he doesn't say it, Kenosaki simply smiles and says, "That's not really something you should be concerned about, is it?" while blushing and looking at Gero fondly. Because even while Gero befriends and goes on dates with multiple women, Kenosaki is the person who knows him best. He's always there, watching, supporting, teasing, challenging. I mean, for crying out loud, they go on several fake dates, even after Gero has potential partners who are genuinely willing to officially date him. Like, it gets to a point where you're doing all the activities, sitting on laps, getting flustered and having fun, when you have to stop and think, how fake is a fake date really? It's literally just a slow burn where we're all waiting on Gero to do the typical oh moment you read in cheesy romances. And normally I'd still be undecided towards this relationship happening if it were any other series. But Marriagetoxin has multiple canon LGBT characters, and Kenosaki's identity is never treated as a joke. He's openly gender non-conforming, unapologetic about cross-dressing because he finds women's clothes are more fun and expressive with more options, and is explicitly stated to be a man repeatedly. So there isn't a scapegoat of, oh, he might actually be a cis woman and was pretending all this time. And frankly, if the series did pull that twist, I'd probably have the worst crash out ever. It would undermine everything the story has been building towards, not just in terms of representation but thematically. Gero marrying a man would dismantle the very expectations his clan is built on. Kenosaki actually being a cis woman would feel like a betrayal to the audience that have been engaging with this story in good faith. So I choose not to accept that crappy plot twist, because instead what Marriagetoxin gives us is something far more interesting. A slow burn relationship built on trust, most importantly choice. Kenosaki sees the good Gero does. He witnesses every life Gero impacts. He's the one person consistently present for all of it. That can't be accidental. Gero and Kenosaki's chemistry is inseparable from the story itself, and whether or not the manga ever makes that relationship explicit, it's already doing something rare. A Shonen Jump harem that deconstructs the genre into something more fun and engaging. And honestly, that makes Marriagetoxin worth talking about. Hey guys, thanks for watching to the end of the video. As always, I hope that this video was able to either get people into Marriagetoxin or just to make some of the Marriagetoxin fans happy, I guess, that someone's covering the manga, because as far as I'm aware and what I've seen, I mean, I've been reading for a while now, but It doesn't have a massively engaging fandom, so hopefully somebody likes this video out there and is happy that someone's covering it. I know the anime is coming out in a few months. It's actually coming out in the same season that Dorohedoro Season 2 and Witch Hat Atelier is coming out, so that is a packed season for me already. But I want to give a massive shout out to everyone supporting me over on Patreon. The link will be in the description as always if you want to support the channel. And also, of course, I want to give a massive shout out to Walt's Comic Shop for sponsoring today's video. I appreciate it a lot. The guys over there are super nice. I genuinely wasn't putting anything on when I was complimenting the company. They've been absolutely lovely. And yeah, if you want to save some money getting Marriagetoxin, that is the place to be. Like it is genuinely a lot cheaper through the bundle than buying all the volumes separately. But yeah, I hope you guys are excited for the itchy video because I'm loving it so far. So yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one.